The coffee cup trembled in Marcus Webb's hands as he watched the blonde waitress move through the diner like a ghost, her face a mask of carefully controlled emptiness. For 3 weeks, he'd been coming to Ruby's diner in downtown Portland, Oregon, and for 3 weeks, he'd never once seen her smile. Not at the elderly couple who left generous tips, not at the construction workers who cracked jokes, not even at the children who waved at her with sticky fingers. There was something about the way she carried herself, something broken and familiar, that made Marcus's chest tighten with recognition. He knew that look. He'd worn it himself not so long ago. Marcus was a single father to 7-year-old Sophie, a bright-eyed girl who'd lost her mother to cancer 2 years earlier. Those first months after Sarah's death had nearly destroyed him. He'd walked through life in a fog, going through the motions while dying inside. It was Sophie who'd eventually pulled him back, her small hand in his, asking him why he never smiled anymore. That question had shattered something in him and somehow put him back together at the same time. Now, watching this waitress whose name tag read Claire, he saw himself in those dark days. If you believe in the power of kindness and second chances, please hit that like button, leave a comment below, share this story, and subscribe to our channel. Sometimes, a simple act of compassion can change everything. On this particular Thursday morning, Marcus sat in his usual booth while Sophie colored a picture at the table. The diner smelled of fresh coffee and bacon, and the autumn sunlight filtered through the windows, casting golden rectangles across the worn linoleum floor. Claire approached with her notepad, her movements efficient and mechanical. She was probably in her late 20s, Marcus guessed, with shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and burdens too heavy for one person to carry alone. "The usual?" she asked, her voice flat and professional. Marcus hesitated, then something inside him broke open. Maybe it was the way Sophie had asked him that morning why the pretty waitress always looked so sad. Maybe it was because he'd been thinking about Sarah and how she'd always believed in reaching out to people who were hurting. Whatever the reason, he found himself speaking before he could stop himself. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said gently. "Why don't you ever smile?" Claire's pen stopped mid-air. For a moment, her carefully constructed walls flickered, and Marcus saw raw pain flash across her face. Her hand gripped the notepad tighter, knuckles going white. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because if I start, I might fall apart completely." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken grief. Sophie looked up from her coloring, her intuitive child's heart sensing the shift in atmosphere. Claire's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and Marcus watched as she struggled to maintain her composure. She looked around the busy diner, at the other customers who needed her attention, at the safe routine that kept her functioning. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quickly. "I didn't mean to—" "My daughter," Claire interrupted, her voice cracking. "She was 6. Leukemia. I lost her 8 months ago." The words tumbled out like they'd been locked away too long, desperate for release. Her name was Olivia. She loved pancakes with extra syrup and drawing pictures of unicorns. She wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. Marcus felt his heart shatter into 1,000 pieces. He'd lost his wife, but he couldn't imagine losing Sophie. The thought alone made him want to pull his daughter close and never let go. He saw Claire's hands shaking, saw the way she bit her lip to keep from sobbing in the middle of the crowded diner, where she had to be strong, had to be professional, had to keep moving because stopping meant drowning. "I work double shifts now, Claire," continued, the words flowing like a dam had burst. "Because going home to that empty apartment where her toys are still scattered on the floor and her drawings are still on the refrigerator, it's unbearable. So I smile for customers and I pour coffee and I pretend I'm alive, but I'm not. I'm just existing. And if I let myself really smile, if I let myself feel anything real, I'm afraid I'll remember what happiness felt like before, and the contrast will destroy me." Sophie had stopped coloring completely. With the beautiful, uncomplicated compassion of childhood, she slid out of the booth and walked over to Claire. Without a word, she wrapped her small arms around the waitress's waist. Claire froze. Then slowly, carefully, she knelt down and hugged Sophie back. The tears she'd been holding finally spilled over, silent and devastating, as she clutched this small, warm, living child who reminded her of everything she'd lost. Marcus felt his own eyes burning. He understood now why he'd been drawn to this diner, to this woman, to this moment. Sarah had always said that broken people could recognize each other, that survivors had a responsibility to help other survivors find their way back to the light. He pulled out his wallet and took out a small card with his phone number. "I'm Marcus. This is Sophie," he said softly when Claire finally stood up, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I lost my wife 2 years ago. I know it's not the same as losing a child, but I know what it's like to forget how to smile, to forget how to be human." He handed her the card. "There's a grief support group at St. Catherine's Church on Wednesday evenings. I go sometimes. It helped me. Maybe you could come? You don't have to talk. You don't have to do anything except show up and remember that you're not alone." Claire stared at the card in her trembling hand, then at Marcus, then at Sophie, who was looking up at her with eyes full of hope and sadness and understanding. Beyond her years. For the first time in 8 months, something flickered in Claire's expression. Not quite a smile, but something close to it. A crack in the armor. A possibility of healing. "Thank you," she whispered. Over the following weeks, Marcus and Sophie continued their Thursday morning breakfasts at Ruby's diner. Claire started coming to the support group meetings. She talked about Olivia, about the guilt and the anger and the suffocating grief. Marcus listened, shared his own story, and slowly, painfully, they both learned how to carry their losses without being crushed by them. Sophie, with her innocent wisdom, reminded them both that love doesn't end with death, and that honoring those they'd lost meant living fully, smiling genuinely, and opening their hearts to connection again. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by liking this video, commenting below, and sharing it with someone who needs hope today. Your engagement helps us reach more people who need these messages of compassion and healing. 3 months later, on a sunny Thursday morning, Marcus watched as Claire brought their order to the table. As she set down the pancakes, she paused and looked at Sophie, who grinned up at her. And then it happened. Claire smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached her eyes and lit up her whole face. It was small and fragile, like a flower pushing through concrete, but it was there, and in that smile was the acknowledgement that grief and joy could coexist, that surviving meant honoring the past while choosing to live in the present, and that sometimes the simplest question from a stranger could be the beginning of finding your way back home. Before we end, please take a moment to comment below and tell us, have you ever been touched by an unexpected act of kindness? Your stories matter. Marcus smiled back, thinking of Sarah and how proud she would be. Claire glanced at the picture of Olivia she now kept in her pocket, feeling her. Daughter's love surrounding her like warm sunshine. And Sophie, wise beyond her years, simply reached out and held both their hands, a small bridge connecting 2 broken hearts that were finally beginning to heal.